Welcome to the SwimSwam podcast. I'm joined by SwimSwam writer Tori Hart and our special guest of the day, head coach of the UCLA women's swim team, Jordan Wolfrum. Jordan, how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful. Honored to be here and honored to be considered a special guest of the day. That sounds really important, but yeah, I'm very excited. I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, and it is quite an honor. We're really excited to have you on today.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
So let's dive right in. This was your first season as the head coach at UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I saw you, you were at Ohio State, and so I haven't gotten to talk to you all season. You know, with it winding down, I guess the way it did. How'd you feel about it?
It was certainly a bummer. The end part of it. The rest of the year was an absolute blast and a really exciting and a big experience for me. It was certainly a bummer to end the way things did. I was in Cleveland at the CSCAA championships with a team at the time and, got the emergency comeback phone call and things kind of went from there. So, but that's all it is. Right. And I told our team at that time, I pulled them all together and I said, listen, we're going home and that's a bummer. But if that's our biggest impact, then that's what it is. It's a bummer. It's a loss of a swim meet or two. And we'll adjust and adapt and do our job and sit patiently until we can get back to normal. But the rest of the year up until that very moment was absolutely awesome.
Can you talk just a little bit about the adjustment as to being a head coach?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate in that Coach Dorencott at Ohio State set me up really, really well to be a head coach. I don't think there is, anything that I didn't get to have my hands in to some extent at Ohio State. And so, the biggest piece that was an adjustment in coming to UCLA, minus the incredible weather and getting to coach outside every day, which was an easy adjustment. The biggest adjustment from a coaching sense was just the ownership piece and the person being the captain of the ship and being responsible for the message and the clarity of the mission and, communicating that piece being my job was the biggest piece. But I felt really fortunate and really prepared in the fact that, I'd written workouts and I'd coached a group and I had done budget and I had led recruiting. And so I was set up really, really well. Bill did a CSCAA webinar a couple weeks ago about empowering your assistant coaches. And I can say that he is a pro at, and so I felt really lucky that this was an easy transition. And then on top of that, Coach Cindy Gallagher is one of the people I look up to immensely, right? She always has been as a coach, as a college coach, and as a female coach. I've looked up to her and I've watched her for a long time. So the prospect of filling her shoes is a little bit overwhelming and a little bit scary at times. But she and Naya left us such an incredible program to take over, a great group of women, a great incoming freshman class, a whole lot of pride in the program and in the university and in what we do. So in those aspects, I felt so stupidly fortunate and that some of those things were really easy because I was set up so well by some of the greats, around me and before me.
What is it like coming into a program where someone's been under, like, where it's been under the same leadership for so long? You mentioned there's like a scary aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, very intimidating. And UCLA athletics as a whole is an athletic department built on a lot of legends, right? And so whether it be John Wooden or Cindy Gallagher, you have to learn to look around and take the good, and then also not be afraid to have the confidence to put your own stamp on things. You know, I had to walk that balance, but I spent a lot of the first half of the year trying to collect information about how things had gone before, and you know, reminding myself that when I didn't know what to do, that Cindy was a pretty great person to call. And I probably didn't do that enough this year. We got to a point in January where we were coming up on our dual meet with our crosstown rival USC, and that has traditionally been a big, fast dual meet. And I had never done a suited, fast dual meet 2 weeks before conference championships. Like that was out of my realm of comfort. And all year I said, no, we're not suiting up because I know how to do things. And we got to the end there, and I finally called Cindy and I said, what do I do? And she goes, maybe you should look at these areas about why this could be such a benefit. And she told me the story of how did we get to this point? What does this meet mean? Why do we do it this way? What are the benefits? What do you gain? And that perspective, to see it completely different than I had, it was a great reminder. And truthfully, that reminder to call Cindy and ask her how she had done it before, it's something I've got to do even more than I did, because she had it figured out. She did a lot of great things in her time here, and yeah, to answer your question a little more clearly, you've got to have an open mind, and you've got to remind yourself that that you can do these things and you can take these chances, and also not forget to look around you and see how it had been done before, and take the good parts and move in a different direction when you feel like you've got to do that. But certainly a big responsibility, you know, to wear these 4 letters across my chest after 30 years of Cindy being the head of this program. It's a big deal. I'm honored. It's scary.
Could you tell us the story of how that meet has escalated? You know, what are some of the details of what she told you? Because that's super interesting.
Well, it has this long history of it's one of those good, dirty rivalries in sport, right? And I've gotten to be a part of 2 now really good, dirty rivalries between Ohio State and, I'll just say, that team up north, and as we're programmed to say, and UCLA and that team across town. And you have to honor those, and you know, I can't do the stories full justice, but it's just years and years and years of you know, one coach saying, you know, nah, I'm not going to suit up, but I'm actually going to suit up. And then somebody else, and you could ask this, I'm sure everyone would tell the story a different way, but it's years and years of that. And then it became this just epically fast meet, and you see NCAA qualifiers, and you use it as a rehearsal meet. And I don't know, you know, I look forward to talking to Coach Kip about his thoughts on it in the future, but now I get it. I feel like I'm in, and the energy at that meet and the traditions that go with that meet. But it's one of those things, like, you can't back down now. It's a good one. It's a good meet.
Tori, do you have one?
Yeah, I'm sort of curious, like, you joined a conference with a number of head coaches who are, you know, really established in the sport. You know, I would go as far as to say they're legends in the sport. So
yeah.
What was that like to come into that? And was there any intimidation there? And do you have, you know, you mentioned you have a relationship with Cindy, but do you have relationships with the other coaches that you, you know, can build on and apply, you know, throughout your experience in the Pac-12?
Yeah, it is. And when I was writing down some of my thoughts before we got on this call, one of the things I wrote down was like, these coaches in this conference. It's the coaches, the athletes, the Olympic coaches, the Olympians, maybe, 2 months into the school year, we had our Pac-12 head coaches meeting, and just looking around that room, between Terry and Greg and Dave and Bob, like, come on. That's the history of just the Olympic head coaches in that room. It's incredible. My biggest comfort has come from the fact that before I was at Ohio State, I was Greg's volunteer assistant from 2014. He and Tracy's second year at Stanford. I left actually a Division III head coaching job and moved across the country from Minnesota out to Palo Alto to be their volunteer assistant, and kind of took a big chance there. And they took such good care of me. And I got to coach a breaststroke group that, twice a week, that was Sarah Haas and Katie Olson, that both went on to, multiple top 3 finishes at NCAAs. And I got to be there for, Maya Dorado's senior year and Felicia Lee's senior year. And they took me everywhere, and they let me see everything. And I've maintained a really great relationship and a really great friendship with both Greg and Tracy since then. And so he's been really, really welcoming. And having Stanford out to UCLA this year for a dual meet where, Greg was returning back to a place where he had coached as an assistant coach, and helped me get there. And the last time, I had been at that dual meet was when I was with Stanford coming to UCLA. So that has been great. And then the rest of the coaches, they've been unbelievably welcoming. We're lucky in this conference that we do a lot of conference dual meets. We carry a pretty heavy schedule. So every single year we're going to swim both Arizonas and then Stanford and Cal. We got to go to Washington State this year. We got to have Utah at our place. And so those relationships, everyone is so welcoming. And I'm excited about the fact that we get to continue to have those. They've been great. They've been fantastic. It was a little bit intimidating. I definitely feel like I should keep my mouth shut. I was a new kid on the block at some point, but I'm not very good at keeping my mouth shut in those meetings. So we'll see how that goes for me.
What kind of topics do you cover in a Pac-12 head coaches meeting?
Everything. And with that group too, we have different levels of priorities, right? We're coaching in that conference. You're coaching a solid chunk of the potential Olympic team. And so, we handle our schedule and, conversations about recruiting and conversations about what we're doing well and how to better serve our student athletes and better serve our sport. Kind of ultimately what is our job and how do we do that at a really high level and take good care of these kids. It's a fun one. I like those.
Yeah. Sounds. What was it like for you moving from coaching at a co-ed program to a women's only program?
That's a good question. And I actually, before we combined in Ohio State, I had never coached with men, even there. So I spent my first 4 years of coaching. I was at a school called the College of St. Benedict. It's in Minnesota, a Division III program. And it was actually a women's only school. And then we had a brother school, St. John's University. And so we had a men's team, but they were technically part of a completely different school. And they were there's a bus between, we had separate campuses. So I swam on a co-ed team but my first 4 years of coaching was separate. And in those first 4 years, I didn't know how that was going to feel. I was like, I've always been on programs. I've always been with teams that had both men and women. I had no idea what to think about that. And I got there and I was like, holy smokes, when you isolate men's and women's swimming separately, you can really do right by women swimmers and by women athletes. You can really do right by their leadership styles. Just naturally, an 18 to 22-year-old female swimmer tends to quiet her voice a little bit to an 18 to 22-year-old male swimmer. It just happens. They get used to swimming in the back of the lane and not being as loud. And so to be able to see what you could do in leadership and in teaming and in training, when you really took care of your women like women, really took care of your men like men, to me, that was eye-opening. And that changed everything I thought about how I wanted to coach. And then when I went to Stanford, I was with the women. There was a men's team, but we trained separately. We, raced differently. And then I went to Ohio State with just the women's team, which was same situation. And then we combined for 2 years, and I was like, oh, this isn't what I was planning on doing. And I had a great time. The group that I coached on a daily basis was mostly men. And so I had to learn new skill sets. And anybody who tells you that coaching college women and college men is the exact same, they are full of it. Is a lot of new skill sets. I had to communicate differently. It was an experience. So I always knew that ultimately I wanted to be coaching single gender, and that if I was going to head coach, I wanted to be coaching a single gender team, be that men or women. But because of that, UCLA was always my dream school. And so when I vividly remember showing up to a morning practice last spring or early summer, and Bill told me that Cindy's retiring, and I said, well, I'm going for this, right? Like I am going. So I wanted to have that opportunity, because I think we can serve our women at such a higher level. That's a personal thing, but yeah, it was different.
What was your swimming background when you were a swimmer yourself? Did that kind of shape that personal goal of serving women more?
I think a little bit. I didn't ever think about doing them separately, but I was a team captain for 2 years. And I remember, feeling, okay, as a 20-year-old woman, how much am I supposed to lead? How much is this bossy? Am I allowed to say this? Am I allowed to tell you what to do if you're faster than me? Like all those normal leadership roles, but I think they're exacerbated with men and women. And so I carried that piece over to when then I was coaching single gender, to be able to see how they could lead and communicate with each other with a little bit more ease and a little bit more freedom there, without worrying about kind of the social repercussions of that. That might be getting a little bit too deep, but that's really how I felt about it. And so I didn't know that I was missing that when I was swimming, and I didn't know that it was important to me, but I definitely felt it when I saw it the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And I do, I like that. I like being able to, a big part of how I coach is empowering our women to have a voice. We just went through the process of electing our leadership council on our team through Zoom. Our captains, but we call it leadership council. And we went through a really intense process where they all had to interview in front of the team, and we did these evaluations. And I asked everyone, they had to be really vulnerable to first say, I want to be considered for this, and I'm going to interview, I'm going to give you my speech. And then you get to evaluate me on these 7 points about how good I am at this. That's a really vulnerable position for a 19-year-old woman. For any of us, I hate, being reviewed like that. Nobody likes it. And so to be able to coach them up through that and go through it. And now, our leadership council has been established, and tomorrow I meet with each of them individually to go over how their peers evaluated them. So that being able to do that stuff is cool to me, but that's beyond, the physiological aspect of being able to train female sprinters like female sprinters and female distance swimmers, and what we do in the weight room, making it sure that it's tailored well to our women and not to what their male counterpart could do. At the same time, I loved coaching at Ohio State. I had a great time. So I think you can do it both ways, but I definitely have a preference.
So I guess we can talk men and women physiologically and maybe emotionally, but let's start at Ohio State when you were coaching mostly men.
Mm-hmm.
What was the most challenging switch you had to make from going from women to men?
I think for me, it was finding the right way to motivate athletes, what type of work and what type of delivery motivated athletes to get the most out of them on any given day. So that was one piece. And then how to string together workouts throughout a week. When you're talking about significantly different levels of muscle mass and body fat and how that affects your recovery from one workout to the next, there were some things that I could do with, a mid-distance group of just women, certain workouts I could string together day over day over day, where they could recover between those, that when I did that same with the men's group, that I put them in a hole. And then end of the season with taper. I think most people would agree that we tend to, need to taper our men for a really long time. And for me, that was terrifying. Like I'd never rested somebody for 4 to 6 weeks, and they still needed more rest and still needed more rest. So that end of the season, that last third of the season, is where things got really different between what it needed to look like for men and women. And that part was, that I needed to really pull from the other people on the staff who really had a good idea or who had done that before. Because that taper aspect and the recovery aspect was one of the biggest differences. But that and just motivation, how to, I could get my men to race each other way easier than I could get the women to race each other, but I could get the women to just work hard naturally way easier than I could get the men to just work hard because I said so. So it was a learning experience, but it was such a good lesson in just different types of athletes.
So do you remember a specific day or like example maybe of where you felt like you really motivated a single gender group well, or you didn't do it very well and you kind of had to bounce back and learn from that?
I would say, I would say that my entire first year with the men at Ohio State, I didn't know how to communicate and how to get them going very well at all. The second year was I was glad that I had that because I had a lot of the same athletes. We didn't graduate a whole lot after that first year. And I could find those aspects where, the end of that year, so a year ago, NCAA's in 2019, our men's team had a really big meet, and I had spent a lot of time with a lot of those kids that the year before their performance difference between one year to the next, it was really big. And that's not because of my coaching, that's their development. But also we just didn't get a lot of the right things done. Now that, on the flip side of that, Pac12's this year at UCLA was, one of the most fun moments of feeling like all year we were trying to figure each other out. We were all together as a group for the first time this year. And some meets we had performances up here and we were pretty good against USC, but we needed to be a lot better those next weeks. And by the time we got to Pac12s, we were all on the same page, all going the same direction. And it was one of those meets where just swim over swim over swim over swim is better than you expected and better than the last one. And that we were firing on all cylinders there. That felt like one of those moments where as a coach, as a leader of the group, I felt like, okay, we know what we're doing. We know what our motivation is here. That was really fun.
Nice. So Tori, do you have anything?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to touch sort of back on your position in sort of the coaching world a little bit more. Like, as you're probably aware, you're one of 3 female coaches at a Division I top 25 school. The others being Terry McKeever at Cal and Carol Capitani at Texas.
Yeah, big time company in that.
Yeah, exactly.
Group.
What challenges, if any, at any level of your career has being a woman in coaching, presented you or, continues to present you?
That's a good question. And, I sometimes on that topic, I feel like I've got big opinions, and other times I feel like I'm not entitled to speak for, women coaches in general. I think, when you look at the landscape, there are not and have not been very many women in charge of men's programs, right? You have men coaching male and female programs all the time. Not a whole lot of, Power 5, Division I combined programs led by women. And so just like in any career path, there's something to be said for, it's hard to believe that you can do things until you see yourself in somebody in that position. So I think there's a pretty strong camaraderie between women coaches on the deck, whether it be at NCAAs or at conference meets, and not because any one thing is maybe particularly more challenging. I think there are hundreds of women coaches who could speak on being a mother and a coach. Our schedules are unrelenting. You have to move across the country to change jobs. So to move up is really hard, moving up, whatever that means. And then also our career path is kind of not fickle, but, we're a part of an athletics program and D1 athletics, and the NCAA is always changing. And so, I can't speak to that, but there's a camaraderie based around the fact that us being able to see success in one another, it just reminds you, okay, you can do that. And okay, maybe there's only 8 of us here, but I see somebody like Cindy being successful, somebody like Terry being successful, Carol, Dorsey, like you see those people thriving and you go, okay, I can do this. I can do this too. It's not crazy of me to think that I could be a head coach, that I could do this at this level. That's the most important aspect. And the part that I remind myself is important as well is I've got to do a good job by myself and by my team and by my assistant coaches, because it's not just for me, it's for, somebody else who wants to do this, and they might see themselves in what I'm doing.
Where, and, I don't necessarily expect you to have the answer on this, but, at what level of coaching do you think it's most important for women to be like shown and, given opportunities that they can be successful there? Is it the Greg Meehan's giving the volunteer assistant coach a job? Is it, at the club level, giving, an entry level club coaching job, making an effort to include more women there? Do you have a thought on kind of where the pipeline starts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, in the way that, my career path, that volunteer assistant or grad assistant position is unbelievably important. But it's also really, really hard to do. One of my wonderful volunteer assistant coaches while I was at Ohio State is Allison Reed, who's now the assistant coach at Kentucky. And she came out of a Division III program and took this big leap where she, it's an unpaid gig. It's really hard. But it exposed her to more opportunities and more coaches and ways to grow. And, then she found herself in a phenomenal Power 5, powerhouse for women in Kentucky. And so I think in that aspect, in the way that my career has gone and some of the women that I've been along with, that volunteer assistant position, finding a way to make that possible and finding the right people and helping them do it. It's because it's hard. You can't take any money from the university. So how do you make that possible to get the right people, male or female, in the door through that pipeline, and then help them to that next step? When Greg hired me as his volunteer assistant, he said somebody at one point gave me a chance, and they told me the only criteria is that I pass it on someday. So here you go. The only criteria is you pass it on someday. And I think about that a lot. Just pulling the right people in and telling the right people, you're good enough to do this. Here's a chance. Hang on for this one wild year where you're not going to get paid. And then I will help you get to that next place. That to me is the important one.
Great.
Man. That was cool. Let's go back to Cindy for just a minute.
Yeah.
You talked about how she gave you the UCLA USC history. Do you have a few other things that she's kind of passed on or that you've gained from your contact with her since being at UCLA?
When I got to my office at UCLA, she had left me some cool stuff. She left me a really awesome card that she had signed, and then she left me some things that had been in her office that I'll just keep between us. But she made it without really imposing herself. She took a step back and she really gave me a chance, and I'm really appreciative of that. At the same time, she has continued at a really high level to support the women on our team. And when you have a coach that is no longer on the deck and they still support your team at a really, really high level, that's the best possible thing that she could do to support me as a coach, to be the ear when they're like, oh, this is so hard and I wish you were still here, and to have those conversations, to have those women over for dinner. She's still in the area. She came by practice a couple of times with her granddaughter and brought bagels and donuts and chocolate. But in doing that, in showing her confidence in me, even if she didn't have it yet, and supporting our women, I mean, that right there it's a huge reminder to me, and a really good lesson. But beyond that, she made it really obvious to me in coming to UCLA that there are aspects of UCLA culture and history that are just important when you're wearing this logo, when you're wearing these letters, just like anywhere. But that our athletic department operates on John Wooden values, and that's really important. And to know those and understand those, and I'm still learning, I'm still being a student of my Woodenisms, but to take that into how you coach, and then to also coach the people first. That's one of the things she did unbelievably well, is she coached these women as women. She coached as a culture and as a team. And yeah, I could go on and on, but I've taken a lot, and I will continue to. I'll continue to need her expertise a lot.
That's, you talk about how big of a deal it is to be at UCLA, which is, I think in the swimming community, you don't think of them as like maybe like a top 10 school, like a huge powerhouse,
Sure.
But like UCLA is like this huge school with so much athletic and academic history. What has it been like just to be on that campus, kind of surrounded by that?
Honestly, it's a bit overwhelming. And my sports supervisor called me out about halfway through the year. He was quizzing me on some of the UCLA greats on this picture on a wall outside of the athletic director's office, and I couldn't name enough of them. I failed the test. And he showed up the next day to my office with a big book of the first 100 years of history of UCLA. And honestly, if I had known, this was what I was doing, a big book. If I had known I'd be home this long when I cleaned out my office in March, I would have grabbed that book. But he took that and he said, and I'm taking you on a campus tour. And he took me around and he helped show me some things, but he also reminded me, like, this is an honor to be here. And it's not about you and it's not about any one of us. It's about this whole thing as a whole. And so I've become more of a student, and I'm doing my learning and my history, because it's a really rich athletics history. It's a great school academically, but athletically, whether or not, we made the top 25 rankings this year, or whether or not, we qualified relays or scored at NCAA this year, it doesn't matter, because the history of UCLA says you are expected to be in the conversation of championships in every sport every single year, and figure it out. And that's, what other coaches told me, that, we don't have to be the biggest or the shiniest or the best the year before, but we're UCLA. So you're expected to go there and fight for a championship. And my boss doesn't care about my excuses of, well, we weren't that good the year before, or it's hard for us to get recruits, or any. No, are you kidding me? Have you seen our pool? There should be no reason why it's hard for us to get recruits. And so that the job is on us to be great, because that's what we do.
Yeah. All right. We've got about 2.5 minutes left. Tori, do you have any burning desire question that might have a shorter end answer?
I can try to talk less.
What's the best thing you've done since moving to LA? Funnest thing?
Okay. Well, right after I moved to LA, I got married. Not in LA, but that was a big summer. So I should probably mention that we did a hike up near the Hollywood sign during the first quarter, fall quarter. I don't remember exactly when we did it, but we did a team hike up near there. And then we also did a beach workout. We only did one. We've got to do more, but we did a beach dry land that was just an epic, good dry land with, carrying ropes as a team. And those have been great. But LA as a whole, I'm regretting how much time I didn't spend on the beach over the last 9 months, now that I can't go to the beach. But just putting my toes in the water and enjoying the sunshine every day and eating good food. There's good food everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Holy smokes, there's so much good food. But just being able to walk out, outside my house and look at towards the beach. I'm about a mile from the beach, so I can't really see the beach, but and see the sunset, like, come on, that's pretty great. Or seeing the sunrise at our pool at Speaker on campus, that's pretty great. When you're doing practice in pancakes again, come on over. We got some pretty beautiful sunrises, and we'll put on a show. And I'm sure we've got some really great pancakes as well.
I think that's time, but I next time beach workout, I'm there with pancakes.
Okay. Sounds wonderful.
Jordan, Tori, thank you guys so much. This was awesome. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Coleman. Thank you, Tori. I appreciate you guys. Stay safe.
Hey, do you love SwimSwam as much as I do? Do you want hours of endless practice footage, race video, and a guide to the best pancakeries in the country? Then subscribe to our YouTube channel below. And follow us on social media at SwimSwam News on Twitter and Instagram. If we get 1 million followers, I might just eat 1 million pancakes. Only one way to find out.